Good people, let's tone down the volume just a little bit because today we've got something really special.
Are you seriously presenting with that hair?
Hey, you be quiet.
You want me to be silent? It is 8:01.
And go base your accusations elsewhere. So, where were we? What I want to do today is attempt to build a super quiet system running around 40 dBA, which is the noise pressure decibel levels of like a library. So that is definitely quiet, using all Be Quiet components. I mean, it is in the name after all. So let's see if we're successful right after this. The new Enermax LiqFusion is their first addressable RGB all-in-one cooler with a standard 240mm rad and absolutely beautiful RGB ring illumination on the fans and the pump to highlight that unique flow indicator through the transparent top. Check out the LiqFusion down below. Now, I want to preface this video by saying that making a silent system isn't all about the enclosure. It's about the balance and the combination of all your hardware, fan speed, RPM, you know, are you getting coil whine from your GPU or not? And like other things that introduce noise in terms of like airflow restriction and that air being turbulent and therefore causing noise. So it's not necessarily all about the case, but the case definitely helps. And you know what helps us? All the parts I used in this video will be linked in the description below. So that is our affiliate stuff, it helps us out. Make sure to check it out if you want to maneuver yourself into that silence route. All right, so this entire project is quite interesting to me because we have the 9900K, which is super hot. So how do you approach balancing out silent operation of your entire system, yet maintaining good temperatures? Number two is that we have the RTX 2080 Ti and the new Z390 Tai Chi motherboard from ASRock that perfectly blend together in terms of color coordination. That is something that I'm super excited. And because Be Quiet is kind of at the core of the system, we have their new Silent Base 801. And I actually think this is my favorite Be Quiet case so far, just because it's not super expensive. It's $149 for totally solid side panels, or the $10 premium for the tempered glass side panel. It still offers the, you know, inverted motherboard layout like we saw with the Dark Base 700 and the 900 Pro. And so I think it encompasses all those features into a pretty decent overall silent PC, but of course airflow restriction is a thing, and they have to kind of balance out silent focus. So like these little air pockets on the side are there to prevent noise from leaking out, but then there's definitely that hit on airflow. It does come with three 140mm Pure Wings 2 fans, two at the front and one at the rear. And the cool thing is that this entire like mid-tower frame can accommodate still quite a lot of airflow and water cooling options. You can fit like up to a 420 radiator in the front and up to a 360 up top. A few interesting changes that we see with this 801 enclosure is that the front panel is no longer brushed aluminum like we see on pretty much every single Be Quiet case. Here it's almost like sandblasted steel, so cool texture to look at, and also doesn't leave any finger marks. Also, the frame is almost like enclosed. As you can see at the bottom, there is no gap like we normally see with case feet. Instead, case feet are almost built in, and there are small little gaps for airflow. So you could potentially put this on the carpet, but I think this design choice is mainly made for silence. But this also means you cannot pick up the case like you normally would be able to by the front, because there's no gaps there. And don't try to lift it by the little gap in the front panel, because that is how you actually remove the front panel, and there is your access to the giant bottom dust filter. The top panel is very much closed off for ventilation, except for those few strips at the back, but they have raised the top panel so that if there is any airflow coming out, it will not necessarily bounce back. There are some ventilation strips all along the top that you don't see, but they're on the sides. So with a low RPM fan like we have set up here, the temperatures are actually pretty decent. I also really like their new side panel mount with a button at the back to release the side panels, and you kind of have to just align them and pop them back in. So reinstallation is easy, and it gives you that beautiful non-interrupted glass on the side and a simple solid panel on the other. You can also swap the side panels for that inverted motherboard layout, but also if you want to showcase your cable management work, put the glass panel on the other side and be good to go. The interior is very much the same as what we've seen with Dark Base 700, so a nice power supply shroud with modular plates up top that you can remove to either give you extra space at the front for the radiator to fit through, or clear up some additional room for ventilation for the power supply if it's facing up. You can also put a fan there, so plenty of options, and you can close them off as you go. We also have these 5 plastic covers that go over top your hard drive mounts. We have 3 metal caddies included, so you can use them for storage, and you can also extend them slightly if you, let's say, need to route your USB cable like I have here with the USB 3, and this case does not support eATX motherboards, so keep that in mind. We also have a fan controller at the back for 6 fans that is either powered by SATA or a PWM cable via your motherboard, and you control that via the toggle on the top IO for auto, having the PWM connection, and then 1 to 3 for those 3 speeds. Here we also have 3 USB ports, 2 of which are USB 3, power reset buttons, and audio jacks. And obviously this is being part of the Silent Base series. We have very thick noise dampening material on the rear panel and at the top and in the front panel too, so it's pretty much spread all around. And actually Be Quiet started as selling sound dampening material first, and it's kind of great to see it really being thickened up for this edition versus what we see on like the Dark Base series where it is much thinner. All right, enough about the case. The rest of the components include the Silent Loop 360, which is definitely needed for the really hot 9900K, and to power that entire thing we have the Dark Power Pro 11 1200 watt power supply. So that thing is also extremely quiet, and since we have like a pretty enthusiast system, I don't want any noise coming from the power supply, which has a really good fan, and it is completely silent. I'll finally be able to play around with the ASRock Z390 Tai-Chi, which has a really beautiful design, I must say. It's not like this really flashy kind of like red and black type of scheme. I really like the silver accent on there, and the little gear heads on one of the heat sinks looks pretty awesome. The reinforced PCI slots have become the norm for premium motherboards like it. We have triple M.2 slots, which are the PCI speeds and not SATA. And as for power phases, we have plenty of overclocking headroom right out of the box. It's just a matter of controlling those temperatures. And to complement the 8-core 16-thread 9900K, we have the MSI RTX 2080 Ti Duke. Man, what a monster card. It is super powerful. And, you know, I'm kind of like preparing myself to shifting away from the 8600K towards the 9900K for my daily workstation productivity / gaming PC. So it's a good start to like working around with these components and then putting them to good use in the future. All right, I think it's time to roll the assembly procedure. And now that the system is complete, I am pretty proud of how this whole thing turned out in terms of color coordination. So all black components basically with some silver accents on the motherboard and the GPU. And then also have the cable mod sleeved extension for the 24-pin cable that really just jumps out, and it's not like a boring 24-pin cable, but kind of like really ties into my gray and orange and black color scheme, and turning all that RGB off and setting everything to orange for the illumination looks absolutely beautiful. But the purpose of this build was to create something that was super silent, so let's see how we did, shall we? Now, just to give you a perspective for these dBA readings, a microwave here is about 56 dBA. My bathroom with the window open, so it's slightly louder at 33, and my bedroom with everything completely closed is around 31. The first test is pretty successful, and I think this is Fred-worthy. So my original plan was to create a system that was as loud at load as it is at idle, and I think we have achieved that perfectly. While the video was rendering, we were hovering around 33 dBA at 1 meter distance. So if you were to walk into this room, you will not actually be able to tell the system was on. It just kind of like, you know, blends in with the ambience. And remember, I have 6 fans in here, 3 140mm fans and 3 120, but they are Pure Wings 2 fans, and we can get even better airflow performance and silent operation with Silent Wings 3. So let's replace those now.
I love these plastic pegs for installation. No need to take out the screwdriver.
Oh.
She's back online.
And after the fan swap, what's interesting is that the dBA readings are about the same versus what we had before, around 33, but the noise profile of the SilentWings 3 fans is different. Remember, I have 6 fans in here, and they're all running around 1000 RPM, and that's my desired like balance between achieving good temperatures and also good sound levels too. But the sound noise profile here is different. The SilentWings 3 produce a slightly lower frequency hum versus with the PureWings 2 that was slightly higher pitched and therefore I guess more noticeable for me. As for frequencies and temperatures, the 9900K boosts itself to 4.7 GHz stable throughout the entire render. No issues there with the same voltage as before, but the temperatures are around the same as well. 75 degrees Celsius on average cores, so pretty decent, and I feel like you know, the dBA level hasn't lowered by me switching out the fans, but the noise profile has, and I feel like this system with the SilentWings 3 is perceived to be quieter. But then what about noise levels while we're gaming? So I've been in Destiny 2 for half an hour. The GPU has had enough time to warm up. I got a little gaming session out of the way as well. And I set the RTX 2080 Ti fan curve to 44%, which is practically inaudible. It does increase the overall dBA level for the system, but we're still significantly under 40. I had to rethink my strategy because 40 is pretty loud. So I think my target now has lowered to 35, which is what I'm happy with. Now here's an interesting fact. During these tests, I had to shut down my light because it has a heatsink and a fan. And the fan is actually pretty loud when you put your ear to it. That was interfering with my dBA meter. So that thing is pretty loud, especially when compared to like 6 fans in the system itself and 1 fan for the light. And so for my intended usage of the system moving forward in terms of video production and gaming, I am extremely satisfied at how silent I had to make this thing by lowering all the fans to 1000 RPM and just keeping the CPU at stock, but not like really pushing it to 5 GHz because that's when things get kind of crazy. So at 4.7, that's the maximum boost clock for the CPU that it boosts itself to based on my temperatures. I'm pretty happy with that. And I'm not going to be pushing it any further because that would mean that I have to increase the fan speed and that would ruin the whole point. But I would love for you guys to hear what the system sounds like when it's at load versus when the system is off. So please turn up your volume and put on headphones so you can get the better understanding on how the system sounds.
So this is at load. Pretty damn quiet.
Alright guys, so now on to my conclusion. I was honestly expecting slightly better temperatures with 6 fans in the system running at 1000 RPM, but the CPU is extremely hot and the GPU balancing out around that 47% fan speed or like 44% fan speed is practically inaudible and reaches 80 degrees Celsius. But if I bump the speed on the GPU to like 55%, then my temperatures drop 10 degrees. So it's like a fine balancing act between how loud and how fast your RPM goes versus how silent the system is. And since the focus here was on silence, then I can sacrifice a little bit of temperatures. And I can confidently say that this is the most quiet system that I've ever built, that is also the most powerful, that has 6 fans in there and a 9900K that stays confidently cool below 80 degrees Celsius when I'm gaming and rendering videos. But it is always a fine balancing act between RPMs, getting a little hit on temperatures because the RPM isn't, you know, too high, and also depending on the case too. Like if this was completely open, then it would be a different story for cooling, but making sure that the system is quiet isn't all about the case, it's about the hardware too and the RPM of those fans. And as always, all the parts will be linked in the description below if you want to maneuver yourself into that silence route and make your system run a little bit quieter. Check out this other relevant content, subscribe to our new Boot Sequence channel, and remember, stay quiet, my friends.